right. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here tonight for the launch event for Matthew Clark Davison's debut novel, Doubting Thomas, and a celebration of queer literature. Happy Pride Month, everyone. We have a treat of an evening ahead of us. We'll have some special words from Foglifter, from Amble Press, and a conversation between Matthew and Paul Lisicky. This is the first book from the all-new Amble Press, so it's also a launch of Amble in a way. You'll hear more about Amble shortly in just a moment. My name is Evan Karp. I'm the events manager for Booksmith. We're an independent bookstore and a mainstay of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district since 1976. Really thank you all for being here. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our stars. Paul Lisicky is the author of 6 books, including Later, My Life at the Edge of the World, which was one of NPR's best books of 2020, as well as The Narrow Door, Unbuilt Projects, The Burning House, Famous Builder, and Lawn Boy. His work has appeared in The Atlantic, BuzzFeed, Conjunctions, The Cut, Fence, The New York Times, Plowshares, Tin House, and in many other magazines and anthologies. He's received awards from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the James Missionary Copernicus Society, and the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, where he has served on the writing committee since 2000. He's taught in the creative writing programs at Cornell University, New York University, Sarah Lawrence College, the University of Texas at Austin, and elsewhere. He's currently an associate professor in the MFA program at Rutgers University Camden and lives in Brooklyn, New York, where he is at work on a memoir called Animal Care and Control. And Booksmith has had the pleasure of hosting Paul before, and we're very happy to have you here with us tonight, Paul. Tonight's star of the evening, Matthew Clark Davison's debut novel, Doubting Thomas, is just out this very day by Amble Press. He's creator and teacher of The Lab, writing classes with MCD, which is a non-academic school started in 2007 in a friend's living room on Douglas Street, where I'm sure some of you have been before. The textbook version of The Lab, which is co-authored by best-selling writer Alice LaPlante, will be published by Norton in 2022. His prose has been recently anthologized in Empty the Pews from Epiphany Publishing and 580 Split, and published in or on The Advocate, Exquisite Pandemic, Guernica, The Atlantic Monthly, Foglifter, Lumina Magazine, 14 Hills, Per Contra, Educe, and others. And has been recognized with the Creative Work Grant, Cultural Equities Grant, Clark Gross Award for a Novel in Progress, and a Stonewall Alumni Award. Hearty congratulations to Matthew. And I think before I introduce Foglifter, I would love to just take a moment and invite you all to show some love for Matthew, whether it's with your hands or with your faces or in the chat. I'm very excited to be here tonight, and yeah, Matthew deserves all the love. Thank you all for being here. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to kick off tonight's celebration with some love for and from the local queer literary community. And I'm happy to turn things over first to Chad Koch of Foglifter Journal and Press, which I think is near and dear to a lot of you, and is a special journal that I hope you will all check out. Without further ado from me, Chad, take it away, and thank you everyone so much for being here.
Thank you, Evan. I know we have a great show tonight, so I'm going to keep this relatively short. A fun little fact, Matthew was in Foglifter's lost issue. That is to say, we had an issue, launched, sold out, and then because we are not very tech savvy, we lost the laptop that had the only digital copy of it. So he is, in fact, in our rare lost issue. One of the things starting this magazine 6 years ago, I would not anticipate being one of the greatest joys of it is seeing these authors that would come on to our, get into our book who, maybe it's their first or second story, just go on and flourish, and to see them release their books. And tonight, I'm definitely so happy and proud to see Matthew's book come out. We had featured one of the chapters in the lost issue, and it's so great to see it, become a reality, and to see all these faces here supporting it. So thank you, Matthew. It's a great pleasure. I never thought I would get from running a journal. The only other thing I want to say about Foglifter before I turn it over to Michael with Amble Press is that we are going on a tour of the United States this summer, starting in mid-July. We're going to be going to communities across the United States and bringing Foglifter and our readers to these communities. And if you have any interest in it, I'm just going to share the link with all the details. And then I am going to turn it over to Michael Nava with Amble Press.
Thank you, Chad, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for showing up. This is a very exciting occasion for all of us associated with the publication of Matthew's book. Amble Press is an imprint of Bywater Books, which is a venerable lesbian press. About a year and a half ago, the owners of Bywater decided that they wanted to expand their project to include writers, as they say, across the entire queer spectrum. I became managing editor last March. And the first book I acquired as editor was Doubting Thomas. And working with Matthew has been just a joy, and the reception his book is receiving has been tremendous. I also want to acknowledge briefly that the next book we're going to bring out is a book of short stories called Kiss the Scars on the Back of My Neck by Joe Okonkwo, who is here tonight. So I just wanted to call Joe out, and that book comes out in August. One of Amble's main goals is to publish LGBT writers of color. So as a gay writer of color myself, I'm thrilled to be able to do that. But tonight is Matthew's night, so let me turn it over then to Paul.
Thank you, Michael. It's so great to be here, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with Matthew. I think you're going to read a bit, Matthew, right? Before we chat. So I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll talk.
Oh my gosh, thank you everybody for being here. I can't even believe it. I'm overwhelmed, and I'm trying to just kind of take it in. I was 10 seconds before I got married, really worried about the bowls with the guacamole on the table in the center of the Swedenborgen. And just like today, but then that once the Beyonce song came on, that Ansu asked me to dance with him in the other room. Ansu, where are you? I don't even see you. You're somewhere in here. I hope you turn on your cam. Then I was completely present. So it's just, I love the Booksmith. I love what they do. They've been doing it for decades. I'm seeing so many incredible faces in here, so many writers I love and admire. Paul, it's just an incredible joy to be here with you tonight. And then also Chad and Maya and the Foglifter group gave me a chance with an early draft of something that's from the novel. I'm not sad that magazine is lost, but I do have one if you ever need one. And then also, really, I'm also very moved by how many labbers, which is the people that take the lab, and family members, and also students from San Francisco State are here. Thank you guys for being here. So I'm going to read from chapter 3. If you hear some train horns, it's because I live in Jack London Square. Chapter 3, April 2012. Homo! James' voice ricocheted off the metal conveyor set along the wall, decorated with a pastel painting of the Rocky Mountains. But Thomas didn't hear his older brother correctly, even when he yelled it again, the second time like a question, Homo! Thomas recognized the timbre of James' voice as he looked in the direction of the sound, a rich, smooth baritone. He thought his brother was calling hello. So Thomas called back. Over here, he said, waving. I'm here, he repeated, scanning the people by the car rental desk and the airport's visitor information center. The two older McGurran brothers were in Colorado Springs for the first time since Jake's diagnosis. James, with his medical contacts, his ability to analyze and galvanize, Thomas with his capacity to listen and execute on a plan, the two would now join forces, relieve Cherie and Jake and Max of some of the worry. Thomas hefted his backpack higher onto his shoulders and looked through the small airport crowd. With a constant addition and subtraction of states offering marriage to same-sex couple, since they ruled Prop 8 unconstitutional, and especially since his and Manny's breakup, Thomas had, for the first time, become hyper-aware of left hands. Ring fingers, sporting every sort of precious metal and stone, gathered light and sent sparks. Wedding rings were suddenly everywhere. On the mom holding the infant's head, a dad hefting, then tossing, then catching his daughter as he laughed. As he made his way between the airport entrance and where Thomas stood at the baggage claim, James' smile seemed to float in front of him, the rest of him. It wasn't a squeal, more of a clear, high-pitched note that erupted from the space somewhere between Thomas's chest and throat. A primal excitement, delight at seeing his big brother. And not just excitement, but also relief. The news of Jake's cancer had wound Thomas up, wrung out the loneliness from the breakup, and invigorated him out of depression with a panicky edge he hadn't felt in years. The kind of manic dread that had started in childhood continued in high school, then enveloped him completely during Jake's active addict years, which coincided with the AIDS years and Thomas's coming out. "Give me a hug, you faggot," James said, too loudly, keeping Thomas squeezed to him. James' phone rang, and he released Thomas to answer. Thomas looked back to the carousel, saw his luggage, walked the few feet and lunged, but missed it. A man in an Air Force uniform grabbed the bag, handed it to Thomas. "You and your boyfriend," he said, "watch the antics around my kids." "That's my brother," Thomas said, feeling his face heat up. "Not my boyfriend." The breast of the man's jacket was decorated with colorful pins and patches that Thomas suddenly wanted to rip off. Not today, Thomas thought. He sized the guy up and felt for certain that he could hold him in his own in a brawl. But the guy's kid stood there, smiling at him, like Thomas was holding out a balloon. And before Thomas could throw a punch or tell him off, the man had already turned it around and plucked a hard-sided suitcase from the center of a bundle of duffels. As he made it towards the exit, his wife and kids followed. His kid turned back to wave at Thomas, and as he hopped along the blue and brown geometric pattern carpet, Thomas finished his call, put his phone in his jacket pocket. Jake refused to have any part of his tongue or jaw removed, and the doctors have 6 weeks to agree on the exact combination of radiation and chemotherapy. He needs us to get him into shape. Zombie-esque images of Jake's face without a jaw or tongue developed in Thomas's imagination. He tried to repack them, zip them away, and replace them with a Jake face he always thought of first. The pre-dental work, still freckle-faced Jake with a swish of bangs, hair sun-bleached, dark golden blonde. "What did that guy say to you?" James asked, motioning towards the door. "He thought we were lovers," Thomas said. James' skin had a strange yellowish pink hue, like it had been stained with saffron, then scrubbed with a brush. "He was afraid we might have sex in front of his kids." "Seriously? Fucking redneck," James said. "Should we go after him?" Thomas looked up to the blue painted ceiling, then back at his brother. "No, and just for the record, the look at me, I have a gay brother bit has gotten old. People around here carry guns," Thomas said, "assault rifles." James looked at Thomas, face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said. "You and Jake, always so paranoid." "Well," Thomas said, pulling away, "Jake's wife and kid are black. Have you turned on the TV?" "Yes," James said, "and I see a black president and gay men on every channel." "Ready?" he said, and took Thomas's suitcase. "What's in the huge backpack?" "Next time you pull a stunt like that, you'll find out. I'll knock you in the head with it." So I think I'm going to stop there. And I also want to say hello to my brothers who are here. This book is dedicated to them. And I have to tell you, these scenes are entirely fiction. Right, John and Paul? Thank you.
So Matthew, one of the things that draws me to Thomas's character is his idiosyncrasy as a gay man. He talks about the fact that most of his closest relationships have been with women. He talks very openly about being confounded by other gay men. He can't always read their signals. And it just occurred to me that his type is rarely represented in fiction. I wonder whether that rings true to you. he doesn't seem to me to be a character who fits neatly in the lines. He's not exactly an outlier. He's also a part of a gay community, but he's somehow in the middle. And I felt really drawn to his position.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering, I think that for me, I happen to have, I'm blessed, I have a lot of gay friends, but I've never had a friend because they were gay. And in fact, so much of like stuff that, so many of the things that actually happened when I finally moved to San Francisco and got into the community, and I was, I felt really safe and was so delighted to be there. But there was a certain percentage of what was talked about and how it was talked about that just wasn't my thing. And then there was, and I happened to have a best friend. I know that I saw Stuart here. I don't know if Michael's here, but I had a really, really good friend for many, many years. And, we were both gay and we went out every single night. And, but we weren't really focusing on other people, nor were we really focusing on sex a lot in our conversations. We had a lot of other stuff to talk about. And so I think that, I think that there's so many different kinds of people in every single solitary identity category. And Thomas is a little bit less gay than I am. Like Michael asked me a question where he thought that by the end of the book, Thomas had become like super gay. And that to me would be an achievement. I would congratulate him, but he kind of wanted to be like Chad, and he kind of wanted to be like his older brother, James. And he kind of is neither. So, I was happy to write about a guy like him.
He wants to be a little wilder than he is too. So it's interesting to experience a character who is, has some breadth and contradictions, and can't be relied upon to see the world in one way at every given moment. I love that about him.
Thank you.
In so many ways, this book is about the effects of homophobia on one life. Homophobia sprawls through the book. I'm just thinking about the scene you just read. Homophobia isn't merely confined to the awful scenario of the false accusation at the school, but it saturates everyday life. And I wondered whether you could talk about why you think it's important to write about homophobia at this point in time.
Well, I think that this book came in, like, I invented a scenario in order to write about brothers at a time when, before my younger brother, Paul, who's here, was diagnosed with cancer. And I made up in my head that he was diagnosed with cancer. And then Paul got up to cancer diagnosis and I couldn't write it anymore. And he survived and is healthy, but it was kind of scary in the beginning because they had a different diagnosis for him in the very beginning that was much more dire seeming than the diagnosis that he ended up surviving. And so I didn't write about that thread for a really long time. But then I was in a situation where I overheard a conversation between an administrator at in a academic setting and a visitor to a fourth grade class, where the guy was like, I saw a teacher inappropriately touch a kid in the class. And the administrator was like, and this was, this is he was a kind person. This person that was saying this, the story that I'm about to tell, was both a kind person and, he had a Volvo with an Obama sticker on it. And he also, came from a historically marginalized community himself. And he had said to the administrator, this kid was touched inappropriately. And luckily the administrator was very highly skilled and asked this series of questions. And it turned out that the teacher, who the visitor to the fourth grade class, had touched the child's shoulders. But the visitor couldn't reconcile and had never seen somebody who was so, in his words, flamboyant or obviously openly gay, and physical contact with a child. a boy child. And I just, this was like, my blood ran cold. Like, and I just thought, oh my God. And even Atsu and I were out on a walk the other night, and we were doing like a photo shoot in sunset and whatever, like, one of our 3 activities during COVID. And he started holding my hand, and I just was just like, I can't, Atsu, I don't know this neighborhood well enough. And so it breaks my heart to say that, because what else would I want on earth? If you guys know Ansu, you know that there's nothing more on earth than you want than to hold his hand. But I didn't feel safe. So I think that those of us who came up at a time like that, we've come so far. And with markers like marriage, and in that particular scene that I read, which, there's a lot of talk around that. I remember around 2012 and 2013, where because gay marriage was becoming legal, people were like, I can't believe people are still talking about gays. Like, they're on every channel on the TV. And same thing, there was this rhetoric about us being post-race, like we were done with our work because Obama had been elected. And I think that it's so important that we continue to probe into those areas. I'm not really interested in like writing about homophobia, but I'm interested in writing about human beings who are trying to be themselves in the world and to figure out who they are in the world with these sort of challenges, because it's so hard to know who you are when you're constantly modulating that to try to be appropriate for somebody else.
Great. I was thinking that this could have been a novel about the legal system and policy. It could have been primarily structured around the trial. It could have been a critique against the hypocrisy of an elite primary school, but it's interested in a broader canvas than that. So did you sense the pull toward a tighter constraint when you were writing the book, and what made you decide to resist that?
Well, for years, the whole first chapter was chapter 1, he didn't do it, period. Chapter 2, and then we went into the country day scenario where, and then in the very first draft that my agent at the time, God bless her, had to read. On the website of the agency that I had at the time, it said full service agency. We help our authors every step of the way. And I was like, great, I've never had an agent before, and a first draft. I had an agent before, but a very polished draft, and never an agent and a first draft. And I will never, ever send another first draft to an agent again. But because I love the people that represent me, and so I would never want to do that to them again. But basically, Thomas sat there for 400 pages thinking about, like, it was all just like that. It was the time between, it was sort of like that famous Tobias Wolff story, Bullet in the Brain, where time just sort of takes on a different meaning. It gets really slowed down. And Thomas basically relived his entire life between them telling him that he was found innocent of the charges. And it's also really important for me to say that the kid never accuses Thomas of any wrongdoing. What the kid says in the book, Toby, in the very first chapter, you find out is that Thomas touched my pants. Accurate. It was in the imaginations of the people around the kid that sentence became something more. I tried to do like the shoulder thing in early drafts, but it just wasn't enough for the people that read it. They needed it to believe it, they needed it to be more than that. So anyway, I never had any interest in like exposing anything. And also I love, liberals. I am one. And I also I feel very privileged, and I have a lot of advantages. And so I don't want to point the finger and say, you're bad, you're wrong. What I want to do is explore what my own blind spots have been, especially as I've gotten more and more comfortable as the years have gone by.
This morning, I was thinking about Doubting Thomas as being a book about betrayal, especially about being betrayed by one's job, by people who seem to be family, but who, when pressed, chose loyalty to the corporation, to the school, to the firm over loyalty to a person. And I'm thinking about the ironically named Mercy. What Does that ring true?
Yeah, I think it does ring true. And, it's like, my question really is more of, I'm an atheist that prays every day. And I'm just searching for meaning. I think that those of us in this room who were here during the AIDS pandemic, every one of us showed up for our friends in those hospital rooms and changed those diapers and held those hands because we thought that they would live, and then they didn't. So I think that my biggest first betrayal in a certain way was with the, United States government for lying, and also sort of the negligence, because it was so personal, because the people that I knew, my two best friends, two of my people that I considered my chosen family, both died at 30 of that disease. And so I think that it's the question about, like, how do you go on living when you sort of have been given a view into things aren't really the way that we want them to seem. And because I love Mercy, I think that she did what anybody. I was thinking to myself, I was thinking so hard, if I had a kid, some of my nieces are here, Amara is here, and like if somebody even like was remote, like if somebody conjured the idea of some kind of abuse in my mind, and she was a student, like, would I be able to be like, no, let him continue teaching? And I can't answer that question because I don't have kids. But yeah, I wanted it to be about betrayal, but I think I thought in later drafts that it was more about the system that fucks us all over, more than any like betrayal from an individual. I don't really feel like Thomas was a big victim of individual, like, I think everybody was trying to do their best.
Yeah. I think this is closely connected. I was thinking about one of the two epigraphs, the first of which is from Scripture, John chapter 20. Put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. And I was thinking about Thomas's word being doubted in the novel, but how does Thomas doubt? How is he a skeptic like the biblical Thomas?
I think in every single solitary way, but I don't even know. I think that Thomas is so riddled with doubt, just in every single conceivable way. Mostly I think of him as being doubting. I just don't think that he thinks that after this thing happens, I think that what ends up happening for him, which is really, really different from my story. It's so profoundly different from my story. This is where there's so much departure from the things that I borrowed from my own life. But Thomas really convinced himself that if he can compartmentalize himself in a certain way and pass in a certain way, that he would be free of the kinds of trouble that he saw happening. He's haunted by the thing that he witnessed with Chad, and he didn't protect his friend. I mean, he didn't protect his schoolmate. He could have and chose not to, and had complicated and interesting feelings around it. And then he also took off from San Francisco in the middle of the pandemic, the first pandemic that we went through. And I think that his doubt then is about his entire set of choices, his entire life, which might be different from, my more like Thomas from the Bible, where it's really difficult, even, with the pre-conversation that we were having about the good news that Michael was sharing with us. I was just like, not until I see it in writing. So I do think that promises of like everlasting life, after death, and if we suffer all of the things that we're meant to suffer as human beings here on the earth because we can't figure out how to be kinder to each other, that there's some place in heaven. I don't know about that. To me, that seems like a pretty good story for the people that want to keep the other people working hard. So I struggle with that.
In our Lit Hub interview, we talked about other gay-oriented novels that feature brothers, one of which was Michael Cunningham's A Home at the End of the World. Another was Justin Torres's We the Animals. And I wondered if you could talk about how Doubting Thomas is similar to and different from those books.
Well,
Big
yeah,
question.
I'll say We the Animals was the book that I read. I was blown away by it. I was just like, oh yeah, I have brothers, and my brothers have never heard any of this, and they're here. So welcome, you guys. So when I was in grad school, I tried writing an autobiographical novel about what it was like to leave home at 15 and cross the country from Massachusetts to California. I mean, I didn't actually do that until I was 17, but I left home around the time I was 15 and then came to San Francisco. And I tried to write I did succeed in writing an autobiographical novel. And in the process, one of my teachers was Molly Giles and another one was Jewel Gomez. And both of them said, all of your brothers sound exactly the same. You're not good enough character yet in order to differentiate them. Plus, Molly Giles said, in the end, Thomas, before there was a term bug chasers, and if you're not familiar with that term, you can Google it. But I had Thomas was so desperate to find something permanent and someone that would love him for who he was, purposely infect himself with HIV at the end of that novel. Was sort of the crescendo scene. And he was just so devastated from losing his chosen family after leaving behind a troubled family, biological family, that he didn't really want to die, but he wanted something very permanent. And so knowing that that's where the book was going, my teachers were like, you're not good enough yet at characterization. Plus, thematically, it's better if he's an only child. It fits the bill. Because I didn't have the skill in order to differentiate dialogue on a craft level between three brothers. And so but I love my brothers so much. They're tied for first place, my favorite person. And it's just weird. It's like, I get emotional talking about this. And I remember when I read Justin's book, it just like blew my mind. And I'm talking about We the Animals, because it brought back so many memories of what it was like to be children together before we had all of our fucking identity markers. That society, I don't think that my brothers and I would have ever chosen to split up from one another in the way that we did. I think that it was stuff that existed before we were born that made it so challenging for us to have relationships after my older brother and I left home. My younger brother was 10. So Justin's brought that back so viscerally for me. Your book, Lawn Boy, of course, has interesting, very compelling things about brothers in it to me. Of course, Michael Cunningham's book does too, but Justin's made me feel that thing about children. And I kept wondering, like that animal children. His book is so different than mine in that it's poetic. I mean, I had been working on a voice-driven novel manuscript for years where I was paying attention to like the lushness of the line and stuff. And I was so sick of it. I had read Marilyn Robinson's Gilead, and I was just like, I just want to write a book with plain sentences in the third person. So, Justin's is like a gorgeous prose poem in every single paragraph. And I really did not have interest in doing that in this book. So those are some of the ways that I was curious about the adult relationships, because yours gets there a little bit. And Michael's has work where one of a trio of brothers is gay. But I was just really wondering about like what their adult relationships would be like.
Yeah, great. I was thinking about this book as being a book about place. The setting of the book could have been simply Portland and San Francisco, but Colorado Springs is in there too to complicate the binary. And clearly Thomas's heart is with San Francisco. And I wondered if you could talk about this as a San Francisco novel. Is there such a thing? Does a San Francisco novel think and move differently from, say, a Portland novel or a New York City novel or anywhere else?
I love setting. I think setting can do so much in order to illuminate the inner life of a character. And I just think that these settings, I mean, Portland, my best friend, I call about 7 people or 10 people or 50 people. I have good friends, can't help it. But Emily's here. Emily, my best friend, moved to Portland, and I've been there a million times. And I just remember being in like New Seasons. And Zach, who's here, just like sent me a text when he got to that paragraph in the book where he was like, "Is that New Seasons on Hawthorne where that character said that thing about the pine nuts?" And I was like, totally. And I love Portland because of the people there, and I love Colorado Springs because of the people there. And then I find things to love about those cities too. Of course, Matthew, am actually in love with New York City, as John, our mutual friend, John Masterson, who's here, knows. I spent so much time with him there. I don't have the beef with New York that Thomas does in the book when he gets mad at his brother that lives there. But San Francisco, absolutely. And I think probably the reason why that's true, Paul, is because I got really mad at San Francisco and gay guys in San Francisco, or at least I thought I did. And so I moved to Italy. And then I just realized in Italy that I was mad at myself. And then I came back and we made up, and it was a honeymoon for a really long time. So I did try to portray the kind of Dolores Park, Dana Thomas dynamic that is really true to some of the friendships that I have in San Francisco.
Can you talk about what it was like to write a novel with so many characters? How do you manage a novel with a stage as wide as this one?
Well, you don't name all of the characters with the same first letter, because Ansu has been telling me how he's like, I can't keep it straight. It's Jake and James and Maddie. And I actually learned that I had a funny experience in grad school when I thought I was completely offended because this straight guy called one of my gay characters the girl and the other one the boy. And I was like, how dare you? And he was just like, well, you named one Max and the other one Matt, so change one of the names. And I was like, good point. So I think that I just so clearly imagine these people in my imagination from the time I was a child. Who you are. One of the reasons why I was single for so long was because I would go in, I would see somebody that I thought was super attractive, and I would make up in my own head who they were based on how they looked. And then I couldn't reconcile who they actually were compared to who I wanted them to be. And so that was a problem of mine when I was dating. And so this capacity that I have to like imagine all of these people, Carl, who's here, who's a wonderful writer, sent me a text when he was reading the book the scene where all of the family are waiting for the test results reminded him of James Joyce, The Dead, which is like the biggest compliment that you could ever give a person that's like dealing with a group. And I did read that story again and again because I had such a crush on my lesbian teacher, Bridget Mullins, who changed her shoes in the middle of reciting James Joyce, The Dead by heart, from one pair of high heels to another in front of the entire classroom. It was in that moment that I knew I could be a teacher, actually. So I didn't actually love that story in the beginning, but I kept reading it because I wanted Bridget Mullins' approval.
I am lighting up at Bridget's name because we went to grad school together.
Oh, fabulous.
She's one of my favorite humans whom I never see that much.
I would love to reunite with her. So let's make it happen.
She's amazing on so many levels. I love her work. I love her spirit. This might be an impossible question to answer, but is there a subordinate character whom you feel attached to or attracted to? I don't know if I could answer that if someone asked that about one of my books, but it's on my list and it seemed like the right thing to ask this morning.
Oh, I'd love to answer that question, but for some reason, and I closed everything so I wouldn't be distracted, but I can't remember what subordinate means.
Oh, just someone who isn't, an
awful
a secondary character, someone who isn't, who's not on the stage that much, but who, has presence and the kind of energy that manages to maybe change Thomas through their interactions?
Well, one of the characters that I love the most in the entire book is Reginald, and he comes in towards the end. He is the brother of my character Thomas's sister-in-law Cherie, and they have an estranged relationship. I love him. Also, I really love Dana's new girlfriend that works at Pixar. That finds him naked after he gets out of the shower. So yeah, I mean, I think, and of course, I think that Mercy and Thomas really are like, I hope that they'll figure out a way to reconcile stuff and see how it was the system that kind of broke things versus Mercy. She only had one vote. And in small private schools like this, I did a lot of research for how I figured out the country day stuff. And in a lot of places like that, it's like the board gets a vote, the head of school who represents the entire faculty gets a vote, and then the parent-teacher association gets a vote, and it has to be 2 out of 3. So Mercy, even if she had wanted to vote for Thomas to stay, didn't have the power in order to make that happen. She guessed I could have protested or quit, but then what would have happened to all of the work that they had done for years to try to get this incredible opportunity for the kids, because the place that I actually based that on is an incredible environment to get an education, whether or not we could criticize some of the liberal blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I love all of them. I don't know. I just feel like I fail all of my subordinate characters because I want to give them more space.
Mm-hmm. What ended up on the cutting floor? The cutting room floor. I'm always interested in what doesn't make it into the final draft of a book.
There are about 7,412 pages of what Thomas is thinking and remembering. And this book is not a book for people that don't want an associative mind to go off. Thomas, like me, has 4 different associative thoughts for each thing that comes in front of his vision. And so I think that, this reminds him of that. That reminds him of this other thing. That other thing reminds him of something he read in the newspaper, which reminds him of what, so a lot of that, if it was just like I went through and tried to see if it's saying the same thing, if it's illuminating the same thing and not in a different way. I mean, I've cut so many pages of what he was thinking.
Mm-hmm. This is a more general question. What excites you about sentences, about descriptions in anyone's writing? What draws you to language? What thrills you?
Well, a lot of my students are here. They know how excited I can get about a single sentence. I'm thinking about like a Mary Gateskill story called The Other Place, which is this like terrifying and fascinating story about this dad who sees in his son this capacity for violence, and specifically like a sort of a misogynist-based violence that he had himself. The dad, who's a successful Southern California real estate agent on the surface, we get it through his thoughts that when he was a teenager, he had extended fantasies about being very, very violent, specifically toward women, which is what Gateskill's work oftentimes explores in these unbelievably fascinating ways. And there's this one scene where the father is remembering when he was a teenager and when he was hitchhiking with a gun, and he had planned on violently attacking this person. And then he figured out that then all of a sudden he noticed that she was wearing a wig. And then there was this sentence about, somebody here can say it because there's a lot of Mary Gateskill nerds in the room because of how I teach that story every single semester. But there's
Which book is that one in, Matthew?
It's in one of her collections of short stories. It was in the New York. It was in the New Yorker
book, or
it was in the last 5 or so years in the New Yorker.
Okay.
The Other Place. And there's this one sentence about what happens in his eyeball with this red dot appears in the eyeball. And those kinds of little tiny moments are the things that super, super, super excite me.
I love her work so much that it's just like this mat of intensity to me, and I can't even pull it apart in my imagination. I can't even pull individual stories or even the novels apart because it's just this shimmering vision to me. I think one of the things that I love about her work is the meticulousness to physicality. She always gets the surface of a body, of a face, of clothing, of how someone walks through the room, and it's always on the stage. A character is always evolving and becoming new in space and time, and it's so thrilling and alive. I don't quite know anyone who does it so beautifully and with such dreamlike power.
Unbelievable. The only person whose characterization rivals her in my mind is Toni Morrison's, and specifically Sula is a book that I keep returning to again and again and again to learn everything.
Mm-hmm.
And careful readers of Sula will see ways in which I poorly ripped it off in my novel. I mean, got inspired by, but I agree that it is with what you're saying, Paul, that it's just like this combination to exactly what you said about the physicality, but then also with this internal life that is so contradicts what it is that you're expecting. I'm thinking about like when Sula is watching Hannah, her mother, burn, and she's like, it excited her. Those kinds of moments with, these moments of sort of like the writer just telling the reader what is happening in the inner life of the character after just like completely getting you convinced within the physical realm of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to see we're getting some questions, and we'll get to those in a minute. And please, if you think of questions, please write them into the chat. Could you talk about your work as a teacher and how it informs your writing? Would you be a different writer if you weren't a teacher of writing?
Sure, I would love to. I do think of myself as a teacher as much as I think of myself as a writer. I absolutely do not teach in order to write, and I absolutely was happy as a human being without a book, because I am a teacher and because I love my students and because I feel like it's such an incredible way. I love Gen Zers. I love millennials. I learned so much from them. I do see how my generation passed them the torch. I'm not sure they always see the torch that we pass them, but I see how we pass them a torch, and I love what they're doing with it. I'm completely inspired by people that are younger than me. And also I just feel like my own intellect is so limited in the sense, like, I feel like I'm, okay, smart, but when you get 25 people in a room talking about the same Mary Gateskill story, it's like, I could talk about that story pretty intelligently by remembering what other people have said. So I love being a teacher. I also was a high school dropout. And I was not meant to think of myself as a person that got to go to college. And so I got to college by mistake because my mentor, Jan Mirikatani at Glide, told me to go back to San Francisco State and get a degree in creative writing. I didn't know what an MFA was. I was in my graduating semester of my senior year when Graham Hewson explained to me what an MFA was and told me to apply. And there are so many students specifically at San Francisco State that fit that bill. Their parents didn't get a chance to go to college. My mom went to nursing school and then later went on to get some degrees, and after she realized that she didn't want to be married anymore. But my father didn't get to go to college, and he wanted to, but financially and other reasons he wasn't able to. And so for me, a high school dropout, I couldn't perceive myself as a person that got to go to college or graduate school, nor could I write about what I wanted to. So thank God for you and for Toni Moore, for Dorothy Allison and for Michael and for all of the folks who were writing books way before I started getting published, for showing me that I could. And then once I realized it, once I saw Bridget take off those shoes and change those high heels in front of everyone while reciting James Joyce The Dead and talking about her latest therapy session, I was like, I need to inspire the children. Like, this is the job for me. And in this very room, there's a couple of people who have told me that they couldn't think of themselves as teachers, who are hired to teach and at San Francisco State next semester. And so, it's weird. It's like the things that I think that are going to give me weird satisfaction. I was on the phone with my older brother, John, who's here, when Kitty Guckenberger, the then fiction editor at the Atlantic, called to tell me that she was accepting a short story of mine. And at the time, Rick, who might be here, I think is here, and I had this game prior to caller ID. And the goal of the game was to like convince the other person of something ridiculous. And you kind of won if you told the person to fuck off. And you kind of, sorry, Amara, bad uncle. And you kind of lost if you fell for it. So when Kitty Guckenberger called me and she said, my brother John was on the other line, and I thought maybe he called in from a cell phone, because cell phones were just starting to happen, or from a different line at work or something. And when she said, hi, this is Kitty Guckenberger calling from the Atlantic, and I'm calling for Matthew Clark Davison. I was like, this is me. I came this close from telling her to go fuck herself, because that's how you won the game when we disguised our voice back in the day. I could not believe that could happen to me. So it's corny as hell, Paul, but I want every single solitary little femme queen that cut their soccer sweatshirt into a crop top and wandered around the neighborhood, and everybody else, to know that they too can be a writer and or teach if they want to. Even though if you teach fourth grade and touch a child on the shoulders, somebody might have gay panic. You can still do it.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your book in progress? I love the fact that you mentioned in our interview Carol Maso's The Art Lover, which is another book that I love dearly and I think is underknown and underappreciated right now. But it's a book that stayed with me since, when did it come out? Was it the 80s or it was the 90s? Mid 90s?
I think it might have been late 80s, but who knows? Mm-hmm. There's that whole decade that we don't, it's like one moment. It's
a blur, as they say, for many years, that patch.
If I'm remembering correctly, and Emily's here, so she might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, even though you can't unmute Emily. I think Daniel, who's Emily's partner, gave Emily The Art Lover, and that Emily gave me The Art Lover. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, what the hell is this? And if you look at it, you'll see. And it's weird. It's like, it's very, it's really set in that time in a way that if you weren't there, I wonder how it would be for people that didn't live through those days to know. Just like I wonder what literature will be written about this pandemic or during this pandemic that you would have to be here in order to really truly experience. Who knows? But I was so drawn in by the language and by the poetic nature of that book that I started writing about this woman, Janice, and her best friend, Everett. And Emily and I also for years had like alter egos that we wrote letters in the mail to from one another. And it was really a way in which we got to know one another. And I've always been, back to your first question, Paul, a little bit, my brother and I figured out this term years ago, heterosocial. And a lot of my deepest relationships have been with women. And I think at the time I was seeing like Will and Grace starting to emerge on TV, and I liked it and laughed, but I was just like, no, there is a bond and this is why I haven't read your latest memoir yet, because I know that I'll be too tempted to steal stuff from it. But there is this kind of way in which that relationship, truly what you can learn and discover about your own humanity, it is revealed in relationships like that I was really I had a roommate. I lived with two women for many, many years, and those two relationships plus my imagination inspired that work. And I keep going back to it. And I'm procrastinating sending it to my agent, but it's done.
Mhm. Great. So here's my last question. What have you been reading? What are you excited about? That's come out recently, that seem to come out. That's a horrible question, but I'm genuinely
No.
curious.
It's a great question, especially because there's so many people here whose writing I acknowledge. I just get so scared I'm going to leave somebody wonderful off. But Home is Where the Queer Heart Is. It's an incredible anthology that just came out from Foglifter Press. And if you guys can donate, if you have the cash to donate, essentially what they're going to do is take this anthology on the road, so that little gay boys like me might have the opportunity to see it, or in rural places where there isn't as much LGBTQ presence, or they're desperate for connection that's not online. They're going to take this anthology, and Foglifter has for years and years and years been doing what other literary magazines are starting to recognize will make them better now, which is like publishing a huge variety of voices from a lot of different backgrounds. I just finished In West Mills by Deshaun Charles Winslow, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was another family book that I loved. Maya Jeffra's The Violence Almanac is such a good book. It's short stories. Ethel is here in the event of contact. I was just like, if I go beyond this first story, I'm going to just keep reading, and I have 6,000 other things to do. I will email you, if you email me, the list of books that I have to recommend. I loved Juli Delgado Lepera's book, Fiebre Tropical. So, I thought that it was so wonderful in about a million ways. So I have a long list. So please feel free to email me and I'll give you more. I always get afraid that I'm going to leave somebody off.
So I think we should turn the questions to the audience. I think Evan is going to take care of this and go through the list in the chat.
Thank you so
guys,
much. Go ahead,
Evan, can I just say one more thing? You guys, Paul, we were introduced. I don't know if Finn is here, but Finn introduced us by email. And I was like, Paul, could you do this or this or this if you have time? I know probably everybody asks me. And he said yes to everything, which, Paul, thank you. It's just, I think eventually I'm going to realize that we just had this conversation. And I just couldn't be, I'm just so grateful to you for all that you've given me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks. Finn is here. I just saw his name in the chat.
Hi, Finn.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. This has been really, really lovely. And Matthew, I'm going to ask some audience questions. It's not too late if you're holding on to one to ask in the chat, and I'll pass them on. The first one I want to ask is from Rakita, who is asking Matthew, while crafting the plot, what was your relationship to the antagonistic elements, in the sense that even while knowing they were wrong for being homophobic, were you able to find some kind of sympathy or empathy for their existence to write them believably? What was that experience like on a craft level?
I don't have any problem with, I don't struggle. Ritika, are you here somewhere? I don't see you. I'm so happy that you're here, if that's you. I don't struggle with antagonists because I feel like we all have them inside of us. I just don't think that there's any human being, well, maybe there's a few who are so evil that I can't recognize myself in them. There are a few, but other than pathology, I think greed and just protecting, wanting to protect people that you love, et cetera, et cetera. It's very easy for me to inhabit those characters because they live inside of me. I think that I have the capacity to do every horrible thing that anybody else does. So I'm not sure that answers the question, but I don't think of my antagonists differently than I do my protagonists, to be honest.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Radhika, for the question. If you want to follow up, please do in the chat. The next question is from Finn, and Finn is wondering, what was the most challenging personal aspect in writing this novel? Personal as in your growth process.
Thanks, Finn. I think that the thing, I wanted to write a novel about brothers, and I wanted to get into how deeply I love my own brothers and to write a book about that bond. But I don't know whether or not I've done that. I'm kind of glad I might have failed with that ambition. And I think that it's a good thing to have a huge ambition. I ask my students all the time to think about that thing that you would never write because you're so afraid that you get it wrong and that you couldn't do it justice, and then begin there. And so I, really want to someday get to that. And I think that I've sort of started to scratch the surface. But what makes me thrilled about failing in my an ambition that I might have is that then I want to write something new. So I'm off to the next project already. So I think that the most vulnerable and or challenging thing was to try to reveal the complexities that happen within at least my experience. And also Ansu, my husband, is one of 3 boys. I know many triads where one is queer, one or more is queer, and what it means to be a brother, not so much prior to, but after all of the stuff about society and misogyny. I think that homophobia is basically, this is just my personal viewpoint. I don't expect anybody to agree with me, but because it's the femme boys that are bullied, and there's a friend of mine in here, and I know you know who you are, who is married to a woman and has 2 beautiful daughters, but people perceived him as feminine as a kid, and he was bullied just like me. So it's really, to me, homophobia is oftentimes 90% misogyny and 10% repressed desire. And I think, and those margins can move, but my brothers and I didn't know that there was anything wrong with the other until we left the house. So, and other people in the neighborhood started giving us those ideas. And so I think that that's, I forgot what the question is, but that's the thing that's hardest for me to write about, because it's so tragic that we had to live apart from one another for so, we had a long time that went by where we didn't get to see each other. Because I think they might have a different story, and if so, they can write their own books. But I think that it's because of what society did, not what we would have done left to our own devices.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Fan, for the question. The next one I want to ask is from Bobby, who is wondering, since the novel is somewhat autobiographical, how hard was it to veer away from the truth? Meaning, was it harder to write the nonfiction or the fictional parts?
My characters become completely fictionalized very quickly. Hi, Bobby. My characters become fictionalized very quickly in life, as Ansu will attest to, and in fiction. Like, if it doesn't fit the conclusion that I want to draw in my own mind, I will change it. So I think that the emotional truth is the only thing that I'm going for. But, for example, my younger brother, Paul, is not an addict. And Jake in the book is. There is addiction in my family, but I'll let you guess where it might reside. And also, I think that there's all sorts of things that I change around. People are composites and whatever else. So I don't get tripped up on that. I completely even when I'm writing creative nonfiction, I give myself the opportunity to go for the capital T truth, even if I need to change the details.
Thank you. And thanks for the question, Bobby. The next one is dovetailing on that a little bit. It's from Jen Chan. Who is wondering, did you have the endpoint of Thomas's journey plotted out before you wrote it, for instance, of growth or becoming super gay, as was referenced earlier?
No, I didn't. I had no idea where it was going. In fact, I had an agent who came close to selling Doubting Thomas to one of the big five several times, meaning that we got emails back indicating that, you know, a junior editor or whatever was bringing it to the table or what have you. And she had relationships with some people where she was getting inside info and then forwarding me the emails and stuff. And I think that she thought that I loved her. I now have a different agent, and she and I are good friends, but she thought that the last chapter should go. Like, there's this whale watch, and then the closest I've ever come to writing a happy ending in anything that I've ever published or written. And I needed that after Thomas had such a bad year. And so I took that out at first. And then when Michael and I started talking, then I decided to put it back in. And so, but it came to me after chapter 4 came after chapter 3. I had no idea where I was going at any point.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew and Jen, for the question. The next one I want to ask comes from Zach, who says, the cover of your book is gorgeous. Did you have input on how it looks?
I'm going to answer 2 questions at once. Well, I love Peter Hujar, and I loved Hana Yanagihara's A Little Life cover. It was my favorite cover in like 10 years. And my former student from San Francisco State, Zach Greer, follow him on Instagram. I don't know if Zach's here. Is this incredible artist that does this, puts tattoos all over pictures of people. And he had done this incredible piece that I really wanted to be the cover, but it couldn't be the cover because there was no room for a title or the author name or the things that you need in order for a book to sell. So the wonderful book designer at Bywater, Anne, took those images and made this incredible cover. So that's how it came to be. I did give, source material, and then Anne made the final decisions, and I'm thrilled with it. It's so gay.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Matthew. It's not too late to ask a question. If you guys are holding on to one, feel free to drop it in the chat. Matthew, the final question that I have is from Jerome Joseph Hentes, who is, you know what the question is. It won't really be an MCD book launch without a full cam fashion shot. Can we get one? Those are.
I'm wearing many of you were there when I had the taco party after Ansu and I went to City Hall to assimilate our relationship and get married. And I'm wearing the pants and the jacket that I wore that day with the t-shirt that Zach made. And my shoes are by Pierre Hardy. I paid probably 70% less than what they charge retail usually, by waiting for 2 years on ukes.com for them to go 70% off. They were in my loved box, because Pierre Hardy charges $700 for a pair of high tops, and it's like, I'm a lecturer at a state school. Is that what Jerome's question was going to be? Like, what are you wearing?
It was. You delivered without, you knew it. I think everyone appreciates that question, Jerome. Thank you very much. And I don't think we have any more questions in the chat. Kind of given a last moment, if anybody wants to drop one in. But I do just want to say congratulations again, Matthew. This has been really wonderful, and I'm so happy that we've been able to have this evening together. It looks like Tweety is asking about your skin routine, which I'll let you decide whether you'd like to answer that or not. Some secrets are thus kept close to the chest, but.
I did go on Zoom prior to the pandemic, so I did learn about the filters very early, and I did share them widely. I have mine to about 7/8 of the maximum. I am wearing eyeliner, And I did find out Lillian, who may be here, gave me the most amazing, it's like a bar, but it's argan oil that's solidified into a bar. And right before you go on Zoom, you rub the bar in your hands and you put it on your face and you get this like dewy glow. So if you haven't bought the book, and I just gave you that set of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, and other tip, you should now go buy the book and donate it to the library, because that is worth money.
Amen. I saw a question in the chat about signed copies. I'm sorry, I missed who asked it, but Booksmith does have signed copies. You can order through the website. I will drop the link in the chat here again shortly. I urge you all to go do that. I think you won't miss any more gems, I don't think, from this conversation. This is the part of the evening where you go get the book if you haven't done that yet. Matthew, congrats. And Paul, thank you so much for being here and leading the conversation. It was really, really lovely. And also congratulations to you, Michael, for launching Amble Press and for kicking it off with such a beautiful book.
Hey, Michael, I want to tell one last, do you mind if I have one? I'm a gay Gemini, so I got to do one last word. You get the final word, of course. Okay. Hey, Ansu, why don't you come in here so you can wave to everybody that's wondering where you are? Michael approached me having read some of the excerpts that I had published of Doubting Thomas. And we had a mutual friend who died recently, actually, John, who was an incredible patron of the arts. And Michael read my book so carefully, gave me the most amazing editorial feedback. And his first comment to me when we met in the Castro prior to the pandemic was, Matthew, you know what? I think that the book, Michael, pardon me if I'm not getting this exactly right, but he was just like, I think that the book could be published as is, but I think it could be a lot angrier and a lot queerer. And honestly, I was stunned because I did not know that I had been waiting my entire life to get that exact critique. So Michael, thank you so much. I'm going to continue to tell you how much you choosing my book for your first acquisition at Amble Press means, as long as we know each other. So get used to it. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
I just asked you all to unmute if you'd like to just shout at Matthew and wish him some love.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Michael.
Thank you.